The Harrison family name meant something in this city. It adorned buildings, graced charity gala invitations, and commanded respect in corporate boardrooms. But to me, Olivia Harrison, it had always been more of a curse than a blessing. I stood in the lobby of Harrison Enterprises headquarters, staring up at the massive portrait of my grandfather that dominated the entrance. He'd built this company from nothing, turning a small manufacturing business into a global corporation. Now, 50 years later, his legacy was in danger of being destroyed by the very people who claimed to honor it most, my own family. Miss Harrison? The security guard approached hesitantly. I'm sorry, but I have strict instructions. You're not allowed past the lobby. I smiled, adjusting my Burberry coat. That's fine, Thomas. I'm just admiring the portrait. He looked uncomfortable. Everyone knew about the Harrison family drama. How my Uncle Michael had systematically pushed me out after my father's death. How my cousin Peter had been handed my father's position despite having half his experience and none of his integrity. The quarterly board meeting starts in an hour, Thomas added apologetically. Mr. Harrison, your uncle, was very specific about not letting you anywhere near the executive floor. Of course he was. I checked my watch. 8:15 a.m. Perfect timing. Through the lobby's glass walls, I watched my uncle's Mercedes pull up to the curb. He emerged in his usual power suit, followed by my cousin Peter in an identical outfit. The Harrison men, as they liked to be called, dressed for the roles they thought they deserved rather than the ones they could actually handle. Olivia, Uncle Michael's voice dripped with fake concern as he spotted me. This is a surprise. Checking up on the company you abandoned. Abandoned. That's how they spun the story. Not that they'd forced me out after my father died, using their temporary control of his shares during the probate period to dilute my ownership stake. Not that they'd systematically undermined every project I led, every initiative I championed. Just admiring grandfather's portrait, I replied calmly. He always said the lobby was the heart of Harrison Enterprises, the only part of the building every employee sees every day. Yes, well, some of us have a board meeting to attend, Peter smirked. You know, real business. 4 real executives. I thought about the documents sitting in my briefcase. Proof of their mismanagement, evidence of their questionable deals, and most importantly, confirmation of my newly acquired majority ownership of Harrison Enterprises. Don't let me keep you, I smiled. I'm sure you have a lot to discuss. Uncle Michael's eyes narrowed. He knew me too well to trust my casual demeanor. This is a restricted meeting, Olivia. Board members and executives only. Don't try anything. Unfortunate. Wouldn't dream of it, Uncle Michael. They strode toward the executive elevator, Peter throwing one last condescending glance over his shoulder. Neither of them noticed the knowing look Thomas gave me, or the fact that I made no move to leave the building. 5 years. That's how long I'd waited, watching them run my father's company into the ground while I built my own success in silence. Harrison Enterprises stock had plummeted 60% under their leadership. 3 major clients had jumped ship in the last quarter alone. The company's reputation, once sterling, was now whispered about in terms of potential turnaround opportunity. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus, my head of operations. Everything's in place. Board members have been quietly briefed. They're all on board. Of course they were. The company's institutional investors had watched in horror as Uncle Michael and Peter drove Harrison Enterprises to the brink of collapse. They'd been more than happy to sell their shares to my shell companies over the past year, especially at the premium I'd offered. Another message, this time from my lawyer. Paperwork filed with SC. You now officially control 51% of Harrison Enterprises. Congratulations, Ms. Harrison. I moved to the comfortable chairs in the lobby's waiting area, settling in with a clear view of both the elevator and the main entrance. Through the glass walls I could see news vans beginning to arrive. Right on schedule. Miss Harrison? Thomas approached again, this time with a knowing smile. Would you like some coffee while you wait? Thank you, Thomas. And yes, I think I will be needing that executive elevator access around 9 a.m. His smile widened. Thomas had worked here since my grandfather's time. He'd watched Uncle Michael's ruthless takeover, seen how they'd pushed out anyone loyal to my father's vision. It will be my pleasure, Miss Harrison. Upstairs, my uncle and cousin were probably settling into the boardroom, preparing to discuss their latest strategic initiative, selling off the company's most valuable assets to cover their mounting debts. They had no idea that their power play was about to backfire spectacularly. I thought back to the day everything changed 5 years ago. My father's funeral had barely ended when Uncle Michael called an emergency board meeting. "Olivia's too young, too inexperienced to take over James's position," he declared while I sat there in my black morning dress, still numb with grief. "As his brother and the company's CEO, I should assume control until she's ready." The board had agreed, though some looked uncomfortable. I was only 25 after all, despite my MBA and 3 years of experience in the company. They'd thought they were protecting Harrison Enterprises. Instead, they'd handed it to a man who cared more about his own power than my grandfather's legacy. "Miss Olivia?" A soft voice interrupted my memories. "Your father would be proud." I looked up to see Eleanor, my father's former secretary, now relegated to a lower floor by Uncle Michael's reorganization. She'd been one of the few who'd stayed in touch, feeding me information about the company's decline. "Thank you, Eleanor." I squeezed her hand. "Will you be watching?" She smiled. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." The lobby was filling up now. Board members arrived in expensive suits, looking nervous. They all knew what was coming. I'd made sure of that through discreet meetings over the past month. Only Uncle Michael and Peter remained in the dark. My phone buzzed again. A message from Uncle Michael. "If you're still in the building when this meeting starts, I'll have security remove you." I smiled, remembering all the times he'd threatened me over the years. When I'd questioned his decisions. When I'd tried to protect my father's legacy. When I'd finally walked away, letting them think they'd won. But I hadn't walked away. I'd built my own company, Harrison Capital Partners, using the trust fund they couldn't touch. I'd worked 80-hour weeks, made strategic investments, and slowly, quietly, bought up every share of Harrison Enterprises I could find. Now, 5 years later, I own more of the company than Uncle Michael and Peter combined. They just didn't know it yet. 8:55 a.m. Almost time. I stood up, straightening my suit and checking my reflection in the lobby's marble walls. I looked exactly like what I was, a Harrison through and through. My grandfather's determination. My father's integrity. And yes, even a touch of Uncle Michael's ruthlessness, though I'd learned to use it more wisely than he had. "Miss Harrison?" Thomas held out an executive elevator key card. "I believe the board is waiting for you." I took the card, thinking of all the times they'd blocked my access, pushed me aside, told me I wasn't ready for real business. "Thank you, Thomas." I picked up my briefcase. The one containing documentation of every mistake they'd made, every opportunity they'd squandered, every legacy they'd tarnished. "I believe they are." The elevator doors opened silently. As I stepped inside, I caught one last glimpse of my grandfather's portrait. He seemed to be smiling as if he knew what was about to happen to the company he'd built. "Don't worry, grandfather," I thought. "Harrison Enterprises is about to return to proper Harrison leadership. And this time they won't be able to push me out." The executive elevator rose smoothly toward the top floor. Through its glass walls, I watched the city spread out below me. The same view my father had enjoyed every morning before Uncle Michael took it away from him. My phone buzzed one final time. "Marcus, press is assembled in the lobby. Live feeds ready. Board members all in position." Perfect. Let them broadcast what was about to happen. Let everyone see the Harrison family drama play out in real time. The elevator doors opened directly into the executive floor's reception area. Claire, Uncle Michael's assistant, nearly dropped her coffee when she saw me. "Miss Harrison, you can't." "Actually, Claire, I can." I smiled, walking past her toward the boardroom. "And I suggest you start updating your resume. There are going to be quite a few changes around here." I could hear Uncle Michael's voice through the boardroom's heavy oak doors, confident and commanding as always. "And so, given the company's current position, the board needs to consider our strategic options. The sale of our manufacturing division would provide immediate." I pushed open the doors. The room fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare as I walked in, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Uncle Michael stood frozen mid-sentence at the head of the table, my father's old spot. "Olivia." He recovered quickly, voice sharp with anger. "This is a private board meeting. Security." "Don't bother," I said calmly, taking a seat at the opposite end of the table. "I believe you'll find I have every right to be here." This is ridiculous, Peter jumped up. You're not a board member. You're not even a shareholder anymore. I opened my briefcase, removing a thick folder. Actually, Peter, I own 51% of Harrison Enterprises. As of approximately. I checked my watch 15 minutes ago. The color drained from Uncle Michael's face. That's impossible. We control the majority shares. You did, I agreed pleasantly. Until I spent the last year buying up every available share through various shell companies. Harrison Capital Partners now owns controlling interest in Harrison Enterprises. Harrison Capital Partners? Peter's voice cracked. That's the company that's been acquiring our stock? Pie company, I corrected. The one I built while you were busy running this one into the ground. Uncle Michael slammed his hand on the table. This is outrageous. The board won't stand for this. The board already knows, I cut him off. In fact, they've already voted to approve the leadership change. Isn't that right, Mr. Chin? The head of the board's governance committee cleared his throat. Yes, Ms. Harrison. Given the company's performance under current management, we felt it was time for a change. This is a trick, Uncle Michael sputtered. A manipulation. Like how you manipulated the probate process to steal my father's shares? I stood up slowly. Or how you manipulated the board into thinking I was too young to lead. I nodded to Marcus, who had quietly entered the room. He began distributing documents to each board member. What you're looking at, I continued, is a complete audit of Harrison Enterprises' performance over the past 5 years. Revenue down 60%. Stock price at historic lows. 3 major clients lost in the last quarter alone. The market conditions, Peter started. The market conditions didn't force you to sell off our most profitable divisions, I cut in. They didn't make you drive away our best employees. They didn't cause you to tarnish my grandfather's legacy with your mismanagement. I turned to the board members. You'll also find documentation of several questionable financial decisions. The private jet purchases. The inflated executive bonuses. The offshore accounts. Uncle Michael's face had gone from white to gray. You're making accusations. I'm stating facts, I corrected. Facts that the SEC will be very interested in, unless certain parties agree to a quiet resignation. The room was silent except for the sound of papers rustling as board members reviewed the documents. I could see the shock on their faces as they realized just how badly Uncle Michael and Peter had mismanaged things. You can't do this, Uncle Michael's voice shook. We're family. Family. I laughed softly. Was I family when you pushed me out after my father died? When you stripped away my shares? When you destroyed everything he built? I walked slowly toward him, enjoying the way he seemed to shrink with each step. The time for family loyalty ended the day you chose power over legacy. Now it's just business. I gestured to the door. I suggest you clean out your office quickly. Security will be here in 10 minutes to escort you out. You'll regret this, Peter threatened weakly. No, cousin. The only regret here is that I didn't do this sooner. As they slunk out of the boardroom, I took my place at the head of the table. My father's old spot. My spot now. Now then, I addressed the remaining board members. Shall we discuss Harrison Enterprises' future? The next few hours were a blur of meetings, press conferences, and paperwork. The business world buzzed with the news. Harrison Enterprises undergoes dramatic leadership change, and prodigal daughter returns to save family legacy. Uncle Michael and Peter were escorted out under security supervision, their expressions a mix of rage and disbelief as cameras captured their walk of shame. By afternoon, Harrison Enterprises stock had jumped 15% on news of the change. I spent that evening in my father's old office. My office now, looking out over the city as the sun set. The same view he'd loved, the same desk where he'd taught me about business and integrity and the weight of the Harrison name. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Eleanor entered carrying a small box. Found this in storage, she said softly. Thought you might want it back. Inside was my father's old nameplate, the one that had sat on this desk for 20 years before Uncle Michael removed it. James Harrison. Thank you, Eleanor. I ran my fingers over the engraved letters. Could you have a new one made? Same design but with my name. She smiled. Already ordered, Miss Olivia. It'll be here tomorrow. As she left, I noticed my phone lighting up with messages. Uncle Michael's lawyer threatening legal action. Peter's wife begging for reconsideration. Various family members choosing sides in the drama. I ignored them all, instead opening my laptop to review Harrison Enterprises' latest financial reports. There was work to be done, a company to rebuild, a legacy to restore. A week later, I hosted my first executive team meeting. The boardroom had been refreshed, the old dark wood and heavy curtains replaced with light, modern designs. Grandfather's portrait still hung on the wall, but now it was joined by my father's, and soon mine would hang there too. The new team was a mix of fresh talent and loyal old-timers who'd been sidelined under Uncle Michael's reign. Together, we began the work of transforming Harrison Enterprises back into the company my grandfather had envisioned. Uncle Michael and Peter tried to fight back, of course. They filed lawsuits, spread rumors, attempted to rally other family members against me. But with each passing quarter, as the company's performance improved and its reputation recovered, their voices grew quieter. 1 year later, I stood in the lobby looking up at my grandfather's portrait, just as I had that fateful morning. The company was thriving again. Stock price had doubled. Old clients were returning, drawn by our renewed commitment to quality and innovation. "Miss Harrison?" Thomas approached with a smile. "Board meeting in 10 minutes. I nodded, heading toward the executive elevator. My elevator now. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished steel. I looked exactly like what I was. A Harrison through and through. The rightful heir to my grandfather's legacy. They'd banned me from the boardroom, thinking they could keep me away from what was rightfully mine. Instead, they'd forced me to become stronger, smarter, more determined than ever. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just taking back what's yours. It's proving that you deserved it all along. The elevator doors opened onto my floor, where my new nameplate gleamed on the office door. Olivia Harrison Sue. Just as it always should have been.